Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the very first edition of TK's season long specials. I'm going to be doing these twice a week during the fantasy football year. I'm also going to be doing some draft stuff in the off season. This is just a quick way to uh, give you some quick insights on some guys that you can start, some guys you can sit later in the week when you're trying to make decisions between injuries, some waiver wire ads when it comes to building the best possible roster you can build, and some buy low and sell high trade ideas that can really put you above the competition when it comes to your season long formats. At FSI, we usually specialize in DFS, and those that ranges from all sports, soccer to MLB to NFL, PGA, MMA. We have chat rooms that are free. So as always, click the subscribe button down at the bottom of the video. Leave a comment. Please give us a like. It helps us. It goes a long way. Keeps us going and doing the things that we love to do, and that's help you. So let's get started. This is very first edition, and I know the Thursday night game has kicked off, but there is still plenty of roster space to fill out for the week. I'm going to start off with guys that aren't your typical Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jacksons. I'm not here to tell you guys to start your best players. I think that's pretty redundant. I'm going to be telling you guys that you're probably in between, picking between the two of them, or maybe someone else that you. For example, if you want to play Carson Wentz, or do you want to play, let's say Derek Carr. I'm going to help you determine the hard picks to pick between, and hopefully we can win our fantasy football championship. So let's get started. Speaking of Carson Wentz, I'm going to start Carson Wentz this week. I do have him in one of my leagues. This guy has actually quietly been really good. I know he started out pretty slow with a couple of clunkers early in the year, but he is a 10-point favorite at home versus Dallas. He's not going to have Miles Sanders this week. He dropped back 43 times last game against the Giants, throwing for 359. He's going to get Jalen Reagor, his first round pick back. Fulgham's in a great spot. Richard Rodgers is in a great spot. These are guys that have been holding their own without Alshon Jeffrey. Even Deshaun Jackson came back. He's out. He's put on IR. But Dallas Goedert's coming back. So Carson Wentz definitely worth it. He's getting that weak division, the NFC East. If you haven't been streaming quarterbacks versus Dallas and DFS or season long, you probably haven't been winning. So I'm going to continue to do so. I don't see Philly in a 10-point favorite against Dallas at home on a Sunday night, where Carson Wentz has thrown 2 TDs in 3 straight games. I think he's always a threat to run one in. I think he's a really good start here if you're trying to determine him between maybe Herbert in a spot versus Denver, which is, I wouldn't call it the greatest spot, as we saw last week. The Chiefs didn't even need an offense to beat Denver. The Chargers might not need their rookie quarterback to throw for 350 yards. So, there's some things like that that I'm going to help you determine week in, week out. I think Carson Wentz is a start this week. Next up, I got Ryan Tannehill versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Unlike the weather in Cleveland this week, Cincinnati's going to have some pretty clean weather. 50 degrees, partly cloudy. You're not going to see a speck of rain on the field. This is a 53-point total. Bengals are 4-2 against the spread this year, and the Titans are 1-4. I think this game stays closer than people think. The line movement's already indicated that. It started out as -7, now it's down to -5.5. Ryan Tannehill has 2 or more TDs in 5 of 7 games. He's eclipsed 25 fantasy points in 3 games this year, and the Bengals gave up 5 TDs to Baker last week without OBJ. 3 game go-ahead touchdowns from Baker in the fourth quarter. The Bengals just notoriously bad right now, and I think it's ironic that their offensive passing threat is going to keep them in the game. And on the other side of this, Joe Burrow is in a decent spot. Tennessee is going to be a pass funnel defense. So without Joe Mixon, their big run game threat, the Bengals are going to be throwing the ball. I think this game shoots out, and I think Ryan Tannehill is going to have a couple TDs. He's always a big threat to run one in as well. A.J. Brown is going to play. I know he was scary with the missed practice today, but he will play, and I think Ryan Tannehill will have a big day. Going to go with my sit. I think I'm going to go with Nick Foles versus the Saints. He's at 4.4 dog at home versus the New Orleans Saints. Allen Robinson is in concussion protocol. They are also missing their starting center. The Bears just looked really bad last week. Nick Foles has thrown a pick in every single one of his games this year, hasn't scored over 20 fantasy points, and has barely eclipsed 15 points in fantasy spots this year. If you have Nick Foles on your team, I think it's time to drop him, and I think it's time to start looking at guys like, Burrow, if he's still available, Tannehill, Bridgewater, guys like that to get this guy kind of off your roster. And if you got him in between another guy, I would sit Nick Foles. But let's jump into running backs. Speaking of the Bengals-Titans game, I do like Gio Bernard this week, especially in PPR formats. He's handled over 90% of the snaps last week. He even got the goal line work, the pass catching work, the bulk of the carries. Cincinnati's going to be playing from behind, so in PPR formats, Gio's going to be a big threat to catch the ball out of the backfield. Like I said, Mixon's going to be out, so you're going to get a lot of the share here for Gio Bernard. And the Titans gave up 100 all-purpose yards to James Conner last week and a couple of catches out of the backfield, so I think Gio's safe to be a start this week as well. Next up, we got Jamal Williams. After the Aaron Jones news today that he's going to miss, he missed his second practice. He hasn't been officially ruled out yet, but assuming he does miss after two missed practices, I think Jamal Williams versus Minnesota is going to be a great spot. He did have over 15 carries last week. Like Gio, he had about 80% of the snap share. He scored 17 points versus Minnesota. Before the bye week, we saw Minnesota give up 40 points to the Falcons. I think, the Vikings are kind of just throwing in the towel at this point, only winning one game. And especially after getting blown out by the Falcons, they kind of did a lot of soul searching. Zimmer's probably on the hot seat, and I'm looking at Jamal Williams to get a lot of the late end of the game run for some garbage points as well. My sit for running backs is going to be DeAndre Swift. Indy's coming off a bye, but they're the sixth best team against the run. Swift has only gotten more than 10 carries once. Adrian Peterson is still a threat in this offense. I know he came up limited in practice today, but if Adrian Peterson sees the field, Kerryon Johnson sees the field, Bo Scarborough, they just have too many guys in a bulk of a backfield. And I know Swift is the most talented, and he's going to see the receiving work, but I don't expect this game to shoot out. I don't expect a lot of points scored. I think the Detroit Lions kind of get shut down here by the Colts, who are coming off a bye, going to be well prepared. So Swift is my sit this week, kind of been leaning on touchdowns, and I don't see enough work for him to get you there. As far as my wide receivers go, I'm going to go with Mike Evans as a start. Now hear me out. I know he's been terrible, and I was consulting with my Tampa fan, Keith Jameson, and he has been telling me he's been a ghost, but he has not been a ghost in certain spots. He hasn't been a ghost in games where Chris Godwin is off the field. In week 1, Godwin catches 7 balls for 96 yards. Where's Mike Evans? 1-yard touchdown. Week 2, Godwin misses the game. He blows up 10 targets, 7 catches, 104 yards, and a TD versus the Panthers. Week 3, Godwin returns. Where does Mike Evans go? Goes nowhere. Week 4, Godwin's out. What does Mike Evans do? 8 targets, 7 catches for 122 yards, and a TD versus the Chargers. Chargers aren't bad at the position of corner either. So that's a really big production from Mike Evans. So same thing. Godwin's out week 5. 9 targets, 5 catches for 41 in the Bears. The Bears have a really good set of corners and a good secondary. So those are major performances versus some decent cornerbacks in the league when Godwin is off the field. I think the Giants are not going to be able to stop him. He could see Bradbury shadow, but with the incorporation of Antonio Brown in the offense, let's hope that they stick Bradbury to the field side of the ball, and we can get Mike Evans on an island against some of the shittier corners for the New York Giants. They still gave up 11 targets, 55 catches for 73 yards to Fulgham. So it's not like Bradbury is going to completely shut down Evans just because there is no Godwin. I think Antonio Brown and Scotty Miller, they're gonna draw some coverage from from him, and Evans going to get free. I expect a decent in a big game from Evans, and I don't think this is the spot where you sit him over someone that is in a healthier wide receiving core in a tougher spot. I think you can play your stud, and I know you've been trying to find reasons to sit Mike Evans. I don't think now is the time with Godwin out on injury. Kind of a sleeper pick and a guy that's been coming through the ranks in San Francisco. I like Brandon Ayuk. I'm starting him versus Seattle. Monster game last week against Gilmore and the Pats. He had 6 catches for 115 yards. He's a big play threat. The San Francisco 49ers are still dealing with injuries. It looks like Debo is going to be out, and they're not really sure if Jeff Wilson. I think Jeff Wilson hit the IR, and they're not really sure if Tevin Coleman's going to play. So this game, I think the San Francisco 49ers are going to be leaning on their passing attack more so this week versus Seattle, especially after what they saw Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals do against them last Monday night or Sunday night. Yeah. But yeah, Brandon Ayuk's a dominant in the slot. He gets a lot of those bubble screens, and he can make a lot of big plays. He does get rushing yards. He does get a lot of creative ways to get the ball. And I think Seattle, being the most vulnerable in the slot and being very vulnerable to the big play, I think Brandon Ayuk is a big sleeper in your season-long formats this week. I think you can start him with confidence over maybe someone like the Juju Schuster versus Baltimore, coming off of a decent game versus Tennessee, 9 catches, 85 yards, looks healthy, but he's had lingering issues with his health in the past, and these Baltimore and Pittsburgh games are knockdown, drag-out games. This very well could be that he gets knocked out of this game. Deontay Johnson and Claypool are going to draw the better matchup. Juju's going to get Marlon Humphrey in the slot. That's their playmaking corner, the guy that creates all the turnovers. So you very well, could get Juju, get a strip fumble. You never know. I don't think he's going to get the bulk of the target share versus Baltimore's best corner. So for that reason, I'm out on Juju, and I'm in for tight ends with Harrison Bryant versus the Raiders. Raiders are a historically bad team against the tight ends. The Browns have an expectation of Harrison Bryant. He was a higher draft pick for a guy that came out of Florida Atlantic. He's been kind of groomed throughout the year. He's looked really sharp. He's a guy they're looking at on third downs on these play action rollouts after they've ran it on first two downs. And last week he went 4 catches, 56 yards, and 2 TDs. But I think that game could be much better. The expectation for the weather in this game is going to be a sloppy rain game. And I think, Bryant is going to be running those short play action routes. I think he's going to be heavily involved into the offensive game plan this week. Baker loves going to this guy. A couple of big catches late in that game to help the Browns beat the Bengals last week. And my sit for tight end is going to be TJ Hawkinson versus Indy. Like I'd already said with Swift, I don't like the Detroit Lions in this matchup versus Indianapolis. Indianapolis is the toughest against tight ends this year, and Hawkinson's only averaging 3.7 catches per game. So he's already getting low volume, and he's getting the hardest matchup of the year. I know he's scored in 3 straight games, but I just don't see the Lions driving down the field and to get him into position to score more often than someone like Bryant, who's going to be in probably a higher total. Maybe guys like Noah Fant and let's see, trying to have a good grip on maybe Waller in that same Cleveland and Las Vegas game. I even like Hunter Henry against Denver in that matchup. Richard Rodgers against Dallas. Even Dalton Schultz against Philly. I just like those guys more than Hawkinson, who I think is only going to get a few. Sorry, something bit me back there. Who's only going to get a couple catches in this game, and I don't see him scoring. But that'll do it for the very first edition of TK's season-long specials. As always, please like and subscribe. We're really close to 1,000. Help us get there, and we should have a fun season. So tune into my next one. It should be coming out next Tuesday. And as always, peace.